It was supposed to be so easy. Walk into the town, liberate some wine, eat some food, flirt with the girls. Oh, it was a dream come true. That was until everything went wrong.
Hey guys, we've got an interesting one for you today. Before we start, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe so you don't miss out in the future. But for today's battle, it was completely generated at random, so we rolled off on our tables to find out the force numbers for both armies. The French have significantly more than the British in this one. We also then came up with, randomly, we each just actually wrote down on a piece of paper what our objective was going to be for the game for our own army, and then me as the British with the smaller force, I was just going to occupy the hilltop and try and hold the hill for as long as possible, whilst the French gave their objective to take the village, which probably meant we weren't going to actually have much to do with each other, but we thought, hey, we'll see how it goes. We then created a secondary objective that whoever could cause the most damage to their opponents would, if nothing else, would be the winner. I hope that makes sense. And we also rolled to see which side of the table our forces would be coming on, so they could theoretically have both come on along the same edge, but luckily that didn't happen. So as you can see, there's the British lined up on my hilltop and the French coming in on the opposite corner. So the first few turns was more about movement, especially for the French. They were coming in and wanted to occupy the village. Was to start with, I didn't really have the numbers, so I had to try and defend and figure out a way of inflicting some casualties. And so we both started off really just trying to suss each other out and come up with our own plan of attack to see how best to deploy our troops. So the French forces, they just went straight down the road to occupy the village, and they sent their cavalry on their right flank just to try and gain a bit of space. Whilst myself, I sent my cavalry around the left to try and see what mischief they could come up to. Maybe tie down some of his troops. If they get the opportunity, they could do a charge. That's about it at this stage. So as turn 2 began, it was a bit more of the same. So my cavalry carried on with their flanking manoeuvre, whilst the French pushed forwards to occupy the town. My guns did start to light up some of his infantry columns, and he did return fire with a bit of counter battery fire this turn, but overall it was just a turn of manoeuvre. Now turn 3, things started to get a bit more interesting. So the French had fully moved forwards now and were occupying the town. I decided to send my Brunswickers up on the right to try and, in skirmish formation, just to try and cause a bit of trouble for him, tie down some troops and cause some wounds. My cavalry had just come round the corner as they could start to see the French cavalry on the opposite side of the fields. I kept my centre as it was, because the guns were giving me a good bit of fire to put down on his troop movements in the distance. There were a few casualties on both sides, but nothing major at this stage. It was still just long-range fire. So as we moved into turn 4, the French carried on fortifying the town, and they started to move a regiment out towards where my Brunswick skirmishers were, and my cavalry started to swing around to get into position to attack if needs be, whilst his cavalry for some reason moved into a smaller field. Wasn't expecting that. I thought he would have come on the attack, but interesting. And he then also started swinging one regiment around to the right, and one of the regiments came up in support of the cavalry, so he was starting to build a defence in hindsight. Again, there was long-range artillery fire, a few casualties on each side, but nothing too major again at this stage. So as we moved into turn 5, I decided I needed to be bold and he started to move his troops out of the village, both to attack my skirmishers and to prepare against my cavalry, leaving the village unheld, so I sent some of my troops straight down the centre. My Brunswickers went into the cornfield to lay down some fire onto his regiment and keep them occupied. But my 2 infantry regiments from the hilltop I started to send down as fast as I possibly could to try and occupy the town if practicable, and if not, they'd be able to hit one of the other French regiments. His infantry formed squares just to try and block my cavalry from being able to do anything, so the left was tied up pretty well, in fairness. It was now just a matter of me waiting and seeing what I should do next. So it was interesting that the French with the larger force were playing defence, whilst me with the smaller force was offence, but it was quite an interesting game nonetheless. So we started off with my skirmishers firing upon his regiment did form up into line and come into the field. He didn't charge me, just started exchanging volleys. My infantry in the centre kept their advance going as fast as they possibly could. Each turn the village became sort of less occupied, so I had to go for it. But it could still go either way. He had that square of infantry which could easily just jump back in if needs be. So it was very fluid. I decided at this point that my cavalry were going to charge, because I couldn't wait any longer for his infantry to come up. So with the cuirassiers in the lead, followed by the light dragoons, the regular dragoons, they charged him. And surprising both of us, they managed to break his cavalry, which were behind the hedge. One of his units was wiped out, the other just mauled, but we did break them, which was good. However, my cuirassiers were pretty well annihilated in the process. So having had a pretty successful turn 6, turn 7 pretty quickly went sour for me. The cavalry, which had just broken through his lines, then went up against infantry in square because I was unable to regain control. The cuirassiers were routed, and the dragoons behind were severely damaged. Basically, they weren't going to last much longer. So, other than a bit of firing elsewhere on the field, not a huge amount happened other than the cuirassiers routing, the dragoons getting mauled, and a few wounds elsewhere. So turn 8 didn't have a huge amount of difference to turn 7, apart from my cavalry coming apart, his cavalry regiment having broken and starting to pull back itself. So it was mainly more morale damage this turn than anything else, other than my dragoons, who basically were wiped out. My infantry in the centre did form into line and were able to hit the French on the flank with volleys of musket fire, so that was quite devastating. So turn 9 did see some fierce fighting. So with the cavalry all routed, his infantry in the south were able to start swinging north. I managed to sneak some of my infantry actually into the village, which was good for me because I had the initiative, just prior to his regiment making it back through the hedgerow and then trying to come to the town. So it was very close, but I just got in there before he did, so that was good for me. And for the northern side of the battlefield, my Brunswickers and one of the other regiments, the Scots, are still volleying away with the French infantry. So overall, a few units which were broken didn't rally, so they kept moving back. The French are trying to swing around to regain the town, and I'm just doing what I can to keep them out. So with turn 10 upon us, the game was pretty well over. I was holding the town. His regiments in the north and centre had broken, so he had 2 formed regiments still to go, but they were still out of the picture a little bit. In the north, what had happened is after several rounds of volleying, his troops had broken. I'd also been concentrating artillery. In the centre, he had attempted to attack my troops who were occupying the village, had lost too many, and his men broke in the process. So he had 2 regiments routed, my cavalry didn't rally, and his infantry were coming up. Then as we moved into the final turn, turn 11, it was pretty well the same sort of situation again. His troops in the south are moving up the road to try and get to the town. My Scots, having finished up with the French infantry, go for his gun, and my Brunswickers were following his infantry to make sure they didn't rally. My troops in the village were just holding as long as they could. So there were a few casualties taken from close range artillery fire, but ultimately it was too little too late for the French, and the British, by some miracle, I don't know how we did it, with a smaller force, managed to beat the larger force and take the town. Yeah, really fun, really interesting game. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. Please leave some comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time.